talk more about this with U.S. Democratic Congressman Anthony Brown. He's vice chairman of the House Armed Services Committee and has a unique perspective, given that he served a tour of duty with the U.S. Army in Iraq. And thank you, sir, for joining us. I want our viewers to see one of your tweets about the president's decision to pull out U.S. troops from Syria. You call it the hallmark of Trump's chaotic foreign policy. Emboldened dictators kick our allies to the curb. I have to say, sir, with respect, many people in this region, and I'm here in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi, in the Gulf, say Donald Trump might own this latest whiplash decision on Syria and on Turkey, but it's ultimately President Obama, his predecessor, who should ultimately own the mess that is now the Syria crisis. Your response to that?
Look, first of all, let me say that there is overwhelming, strong bipartisan support here in Washington, D.C., Republicans and Democrats, as well as bicameral House members and members of the Senate that are condemning, criticizing President Trump's decision. His decision demonstrates that he is either ignorant of the circumstances on the ground and history, or he's indifferent to the consequences of his actions. What we're seeing today in northern Syria is a direct result of President Trump's decision. It was not unknown to him, as demonstrated as early as December of last year when Secretary Mattis resigned, when President Trump at that point threatened to withdraw U.S. forces from Syria.
I think my point is, and I guess it's a question to you, do you accept that this isn't the first U.S. president in recent history to be out of touch with the realities on the ground here in the Middle East?
Look, what we've seen before, and look, I was a big supporter of the prior administration, but when you pull U.S. forces out and you haven't completed the job, the lesson that we've now learned is you're going to see a reemergence of violent extremist organizations. That's what happened in Iraq with ISIS, and that is what no doubt is going to happen here in Syria. While over the last several years, the United States, primarily with our Kurdish partners, have diminished the ISIS's capabilities in Syria. We have greatly reduced, if not eliminated, the physical caliphate. We have not eliminated the ideology, and we know that there are over 10,000 ISIS fighters that are still in Syria in the custody of our Kurdish partners. We run the risk in withdrawing from Syria that there will be a reemergence of ISIS. And what that means for the United States, it's a real threat not only to the United States, it's a threat to Europe, it's a threat to our allies and partners around the world. This is a mistake. It was unavoidable.
Donald Trump is calling on Ankara to end this incursion. Mr. Erdogan himself, writing in the Wall Street Journal today, and I quote, "My administration repeatedly warned that we will be unable to stop refugees from flooding into the West without international financial support. Those warnings fell on deaf ears as governments eager to avoid responsibility portrayed as a threat what was intended as a mere statement of fact." I mean, he's speaking to the wider international community here, but this, of course, not falling on deaf ears in the States, I'm sure. He says, since the international community didn't come up with a solution on a myriad of things, not least the issue of 3.6 million refugees, Turkey had to act. Does he have a point?
You're going to have to repeat that question. I apologize. It's loud in the background here.
Apologies. Effectively, President Erdogan saying that the international community, including the United States, didn't come up with a solution on refugees, on their enemy to the south in Syria, the PKK, YPG. Turkey had to act, he said. Does he have a point?
Well, this is the point. The point is that with the presence of U.S. Special Forces who are participating, they're coordinating with Turkey and the Kurds to create a safe zone in northern Syria. It may have not been the best and the most optimal scenario, but certainly it brought stability to an otherwise volatile region by removing U.S. forces, which basically green-lighted Turkey moving into Syria. Now we're seeing, today it's reported 250,000 Syrians fleeing to the south. They're now internally displaced. That's on top of the 3 million Syrians that are refugees in Turkey. So this was all avoidable, and the decision that the president made to withdraw U.S. forces green-lighted Erdogan's decision.
As you say, I mean, bipartisan criticism of the U.S. president for his actions with regard Turkey and Syria. That is not the case when it comes to impeachment and/or removal. Where do you stand on this impeachment issue? Should he be impeached? Should he be removed?
Look, right now the House Intelligence Committee is undertaking a very focused look at the president's conduct when it comes to using a foreign government official, the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, to dig up dirt on a political opponent, in this case, Vice President Biden. President Trump invited foreign interference in our 2020 election. That's an abuse of power. It's a betrayal of his oath of office. It undermines our national security because it undermines our elections. That's certainly prima facie when you look at the transcript summary of the president's conversation with President Zelensky, when you look at the credible and urgent complaint made by the whistleblower. That's prima facie impeachable offense. So I think that the House Intelligence Committee is doing the right thing. They're conducting the investigations. I suspect that in due time, articles of impeachment will come to the floor of the House, and we ought to be able to send something to the Senate for a trial.
With that, we're going to leave it there. It's a pleasure having you on, sir. Like I say, your insight, particularly with regard to the Middle East, very important for us and our viewers. Congressman Anthony Brown.